Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Jack Smith.
I'm Shrikar Rajendran.
I'm Anish Gupta.
And I'm Nick Coldiron.
Yeah, so Nick's a very good friend of ours and a Packers fan here to talk about the NFC North. Let's start with the Bears. What do you guys think of their offseason so far?
I think the Chicago Bears, they're one of the most disappointing players in free agency. You know, when faced with the choice between Danny Trevathan and Nick Kwiatkowski at linebacker, they opted for the older, less productive Trevathan, and the two went for nearly the same price. And I think they signed Jimmy Graham too. He had 4 catches for 30 yards against Chicago last season. I think his days as an elite option are over. And, then there's the quarterback position. There were plenty of veteran quarterbacks available to push Mitch Trubisky. The Bears traded for Nick Foles. He has a $15.6 million cap hit in 2020. There is an out in 2021, but I think spending that much on a guy who will potentially be the backup, he may start, but who knows? I don't think that's wise for a team that went 8-8 last season. I think Robert Quinn may be the lone upgrade. He'll likely outproduce the departing Leonard Floyd, who managed just 11.5 sacks over the last 3 seasons. HaHa Clinton-Dix and Prince Amukamara were allowed to walk, and they re-signed Deion Bush and brought in Artie Burns. I think they'll be fortunate if those moves end up being net neutral.
I think with the Bears, there were very few moves that I liked. I mean, the Nick Foles trade I hated because you're bringing in a big contract. He's not getting any younger, and also there are reports saying they're going to battle for the QB position, and I'll give it to Foles to win. But really, what are you getting yourself into? If I was Matt Nagy, who's a really good coach, by the way, I don't understand. I think Winston is a better option. I think Cam is a better option. I even think Dalton is a better option. There's so many quarterbacks out there that they could have gone with. And Nick Foles just isn't the type of guy. I feel like he's a system quarterback, and I kind of saw that with Philadelphia with Doug Peterson. I think we can all agree that kind of hypothesis by a lot of fans was proven right this year in Jacksonville. Obviously, injuries kind of derailed him, but still, I just don't see him being a franchise quarterback, and I think they should have gone differently there. I also believe they overpaid for Robert Quinn, which they kind of had to, but still, you didn't have to give him that much money. I think it was 5 years, $70 million, which is a lot for a player that I would say also was kind of a system D lineman under Dallas's kind of defensive line coach. I forget his name, but I know he has a good repertoire there. And you're going alongside Khalil Mack, and you had DeMarcus Lawrence in Dallas, so Khalil Mack is definitely an upgrade there. But I think with the Bears, it's like you're paying essentially $33 million in the cap for 2 defensive linemen. That's a lot of money. And we were talking about it earlier with the Niners. They were essentially going to go into that problem with paying so much money for just a few players. I think the Bears are already in that scenario with Foles, Quinn, and Khalil Mack. They're basically digging themselves into a deeper hole, kind of like LA, and I just don't see them kind of escaping that. And there weren't really any other signings that I particularly liked. I don't know where they're going to go in the draft. I don't really see what they can do. They have good players. I like Allen Robinson a lot. I think he was a great pickup. But this offseason, I don't really see anything that they did that improved their team.
Yeah, for me, I definitely thought the Robert Quinn trade was the best signing for them. But I honestly don't hate the Nick Foles signing because we've seen that Trubisky is very unreliable. And he only had flashes that one season, but besides that, he's been a sorry quarterback. But I also think bringing in Jimmy Graham is kind of irrelevant since he hasn't been able to produce.
But he has veteran leadership, and then also would you say Foles is better than Cam, Winston, or Dalton, which all could have been cheaper options?
No, I wouldn't, but I still think Nick Foles still has some talent left in him, so I don't hate the trade, but they definitely could have gone somewhere else.
Yeah,
and also,
quick
quick note, just 1 second. I think they gave up a 4th-round pick, right? They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to give up. You could have gotten again Cam for considerably low. So I think, Nick Foles is he's shown flashes, but I just don't see again him in that system. Go ahead, Jack.
I think he's got potential. I like the Nick. I didn't love the Nick Foles move, but I didn't hate it as much as you guys did because I think he's better than Trubisky. He's kind of shown that he has more locker room presence than Trubisky will for the next couple of years at least. I think he'll be able to compete for the starting quarterback spot. And if he does win it, I think he could make the Bears close to a playoff team. But the rest of the moves, I mean, Robert Quinn getting 5 years and $70 million was just too much length and money for me. And Jimmy Graham, I absolutely hated that signing. Probably just one of the worst signings that I saw over the entire offseason because he's just washed. And they already have, I think they have the most money invested in tight ends of any team. And none of them are very good. So, like, I just didn't like that move specifically. So I'll start off with grades. I gave the Bears a C+ because I think they got a little bit worse, but there's potential for Quinn and Foles to play really well. And so that's why it's a C+ and not lower for me.
I feel like that's pretty generous. I'm gonna give them a D because I feel like it's so hard for me to find the positive. Like, even their best signing for me is questionable. Keep in mind, Robert Quinn is 29, and they signed him to a 5-year deal. So while he's an upgrade now, the deal may not age well. And ultimately, this offseason, I think it may come down to Foles. If he beats out Trubisky for the job and the Bears get good quarterback play, they will improve from their 8-8 record. If not, they didn't do a whole lot to help themselves take steps forward next season. So I'm going to give him a D. It's a very questionable offseason.
For the Bears, I think my grade was kind of generous. I gave him a C- because on the one hand, Quinn does improve. Like, he's a better positional player than Leonard Floyd, and him alongside Mack is pretty deadly considering that he did well with DeMarcus Lawrence last year, getting 11.5 sacks. But, I mean, the Bears, like, again, you said Kwiatkowski or however you say his name. I mean, you picked him over Trevathan. I don't agree with that choice. Like, a lot of these 50-50 moves I'm seeing with these teams, like, for example, we were talking about Buckner and Armstead. I wasn't in the favor. I'm always in the favor of the younger guy, and if you go for the older one, it's just, I mean, you're essentially going off what he's done in the past. But, like, in these signings, you have to keep in mind, like, with free agency, you're always looking for what they can do in the future, especially in the NFL. So they didn't address that. And I think, yeah, Foles is better than Trubisky, in my opinion, because he has that playoff experience. And I think for a quarterback, that's very essential. But, again, I still think he's a systematic quarterback, and there are options that they could have taken. So I think I'm going to stick with the C-. I think it's pretty generous considering what they have. And also, they don't have draft capital considering what they gave up for Khalil Mack. So I don't know the direction they're going, but I think it's trending in a downward spiral.
Yeah, so I gave him a C, just because I don't hate the Robert Quinn trade. I think he's a good player, and I think he's still got a couple more good years. And I also see the upside of bringing in Nick Foles, so that's why I thought C.
All right, so now let's move on to the Lions. What do you guys think of them?
I think Matt Patricia put his stamp on Detroit with these free agency moves, adding former Patriots, Jamie Collins, Danny Shelton. Collins appears to be a good signing, but his lack of results the last time he left New England is a reason for pause. Danny Shelton should provide some much-needed run stuffing after Detroit lost A'Shawn Robinson, Damon Harrison. I think signing Desmond Trufant was a good move to soften the blow that came from the Darius Slay trade, but there's no way around it. The offensive line got worse. Rick Wagner is by no means a great tackle, but Graham Glasgow was one of the best interior offensive linemen on the market. And the Lions replaced Wagner by overpaying for Halapoulivaati Vaitai. And I don't think they got a good replacement for Glasgow. Duron Harmon, I think he's an upside signing who could turn out to be a steal at 4 years, $17 million. His familiarity with Patricia could make him a guiding veteran presence. So it's not bad, but it's not a whole lot of good either.
With the Lions, I think this was one of the worst free agencies in my opinion. Like, as a Browns fan, I've seen Jamie Collins and Danny Shelton outside of the New England system, and trust me, they have not worked at all. So I think they're a product of Bill Belichick's system. And I know definitely Jamie Collins is, because he has not done anything outside of the Patriots organization. And I don't see him continuing it even with Matt Patricia. I could be very well proven wrong because of Patricia's defensive mastermind, but as of right now, I don't like that signing. I think Harmon was an interesting one because they did get him for cheap, especially for 4 years. So that was the one expatriate that I liked as a signing. I think the Lions, and then Vaitai, I mean, you overpaid so much for a guy. Like, I think it wasn't even the annual salary. It was just 5 years. 5 years, you're committing a lot to a guy who hasn't made an All-Pro or Pro Bowl selection. And, yeah, he was serviceable. I think he got a PFF grade of something, and I think it was 70 to 75. But that's serviceable. But, like, 5 years, you could definitely do better in the next 5 years than Vaitai. and I don't like how much they committed to him. I think their best signing was Jaron Curse. He's a 6'4" safety, and I think he's great. And he can be great in the box. He can also be great in special teams. So I think that was a good signing. But other than that, I mean, the Lions they've been making questionable moves, and I honestly think they should have thought about moving on from Matt Stafford because, I mean, he's been injury prone. Yeah, he's been really good when healthy, but his back problems, I mean, this year I think he missed like 6 to 10 games. I can't remember, but he's not – I think he's got to – I think a change of scenery would be great for him. And I think obviously there are teams that can use him maybe as a backup and for him to step forward when, the next guy's out. Like I think Pittsburgh would be an interesting fit. Maybe even New England. Stafford could come in there and do some great things. But yeah, the Lions are just not – I don't think – they're going again with the same group of guys they have. I mean, Golladay and Jones are a solid tandem, but like Matt Stafford just has too many questions with his injuries, and I just don't know the direction they're heading. And all these expatriates, like it just goes to show like there are players in the NFL that just work off a system. Like we've seen that countless times, and especially in this league, like teams got to recognize that. And unfortunately, the Lions haven't. And Jamie Collins is one that I could be very wrong about. But like people like Danny Shelton, I mean, he didn't do anything with Cleveland, and he was a first-round pick. I mean, at the time, Garrett wasn't even there, so it was all him, like that, what he could do. And I mean, with the Detroit Lions defensive line, there's not much else. So I mean, there's no Kyle Van Noy to help you out. So, or Donta Hightower. So I think the Lions made a lot of questionable moves here, and that's why I really didn't like their free agency.
Yeah, so losing Darius Slay, in my opinion, was definitely the biggest loss. And I think he's just been such a consistent corner for so long. And I think bringing in Desmond Trufant was a good move by them to help kind of cover that hole, but he definitely won't. I don't think he'll play at the level that Darius Slay was at. But I think I kind of disagree with you, Nish. I think Jamie Collins will perform, especially under Matt Patricia. I think he's got potential. Danny Shelton, a little questionable on that one. But overall, I think the Lions didn't do great, but I think they could be in a worse position.
Yeah,
but they lost Kennard. So, like, how do you think – you think Collins will definitely fill in for them? Like, that's a big void.
It's 50-50 for me. It just depends on how he performs in that system.
Yeah, I think that Patricia knows he's got a year left where, I mean, he's got a window. He needs to win this year, otherwise he's gone. So he went out and he got his guys. I mean, Jamie Collins is a product of Patricia. I don't think he's a product of Belichick, like you were talking about. He's a product of what Patricia wants to do on defense, which is he wants linebackers that can both be off the ball and a pass rusher. And that worked for Collins when Patricia was there. So he's going out and he's getting his guy. I think it's an upgrade over Kennard is kind of what you're hinting at there, Anish. But then Danny Shelton, I don't know. He's definitely not replacing Damon Harrison, and it's interesting to see what he's going to do. Trufant was good, a Band-Aid for losing Slay, but there's no way he's going to match Slay's production over his years as a Lion. And then, I mean, you just look at the best players on the Lions last year, and they lost a bunch of them. Slay, Kennard, Robinson, Glasgow. I mean, they definitely got worse. There's no way you can beat around the bush on that one. And then signing Vitae to a way too long of a deal for a swing tackle at best in his career. So I wasn't a huge fan of what the Lions did this year, but I thought they made some decent moves. I'll give them probably a C-.
I'm going to agree with that. I think the Lions should be lauded for investing in their defense, which allowed the second most yards per game in 2019. They had a lot of outgoing talent, but I think they did well to bring in players that Patricia is comfortable with. We kind of touched on this a little bit with Collins, Shelton. However, if Collins doesn't pan out, Detroit is pretty short on impact players outside of Trufant, who's already a downgrade from Slay. The offensive line will miss Glasgow. Vitae should be an upgrade over Wagner, but he was never a full-time starter in Philadelphia. Like a 5-year, $50 million deal is a lot to hand out to a player with 20 starts in 4 seasons. So I'm going to give him a B- because I do like the moves they made on defense, but I just don't like where they went with the offensive line.
With the Lions, I think I forgot to touch on it, but like I was a huge fan of Trufant in 2014. Like this is 2020, and he's a lot older than he was back then. I don't think he's gonna replace Slay, and they didn't get enough value for him. You got a 3rd round pick, like that's not 3rd and a 5th is not enough for us.
But they needed to get rid of him.
I agree. So, I mean, that's why I'm not as mad as I should be. But like you definitely could have gotten. I think you easily could have gotten a second. Like I would take a second and maybe like a sixth over a third and a fourth, in my opinion, especially in this draft class. So I think you definitely could have gotten more for Slay. Yeah, people did know about that, and also Trufant, I don't think he'll be a good replacement. He hasn't been a solid number one corner since, again, like 2015. It's been a really long time. So my grade was pretty generous. I gave him a D+, and I think that was pretty generous considering that I didn't like a single one of their moves. And I mean, Jamie Collins, like you guys said, that's the one wild card I see here. I think maybe he can do well under Patricia, but again, that's the one guy I see that, and him and Harmon, sorry. Those are the two guys I see like being possibly benefiting from having Patricia. Also, Curse, just because of his height, I think he's a good kind of in the box kind of guy, and he can definitely help with special teams. But yeah, I think a D+ is where I'll go with this team because they have no direction. Now, what are you going to do with the third pick? Are you going to go with Jeff Okudah? Like, what? I really have no clue where they're going to go with this pick. And I mean, after going 3-12-1, I mean, Stafford still has questions about his injuries. I mean, yeah, you have receivers, but like Hawkinson was also a pretty bad pick last year. I mean, this team has a lot of questions. I think a D+ is a pretty generous grade considering that
I could see
really
them. I could see them
upgrade.
trading out of the third pick
I can too.
potentially.
Yeah, me too.
So for the Lions, I said between like a C and a C-, because I mean I like the Jamie Collins signing, but besides that, Desmond Trufant I thought was an okay signing, but really nothing much else. So I didn't think they did that well.
All right. So how about Nick? How about you start us out on the Packers? There's not a whole lot to talk about, but we gotta go over it.
Yeah, there really isn't much to talk about with the Packers, and I'm not a big fan of what they've done so far. Bringing in Christian Kirksey, I don't hate that, but he's coming off an injury. Bringing in Devin Funchess, also coming off an injury. That one I'm a little more high on because Devin Funchess has shown that he's been able to take volume, but I'm still skeptical with the injury. And Packers wide receiver core has been sorry, but outside Devontae Adams for the past 2 years, 3 years. So I don't hate that, but I think it could be a bust potentially. We also brought in Rick Wagner, obviously, to replace Brian Bulaga. I don't hate that either. Losing Graham, that doesn't matter. He's getting old and washed up. And then also losing Blake Martinez and Kyle Fackrell. I think that's kind of big because Blake Martinez, he was a pretty good middle linebacker. I mean, Kyle Fackrell didn't do much last year, but I don't know if Christian Kirksey will be able to fill in the gap that Martinez left.
I think there's no doubt that when you go.
No, you can go ahead.
All right. I think there's no doubt that when Kirksey's on the field, he's better than Blake Martinez. I'm way lower on Blake Martinez than a lot of people are. I think he can only tackle, and that's it. I don't see him do very well in pass coverage at all. But the problem with Kirksey is you have to have him on the field to make an impact, and he's almost able to be labeled injury prone, but not quite. So if they can get him on the field, I think that's a great signing. Devin Funchess helps that receiver core because it was, I mean, one of the worst in the league aside from Devontae Adams. And then losing Brian Bulaga, though, was the move that really I didn't like because I thought Brian Bulaga was probably the best tackle on the market because I think he's better than Conklin. And so losing him and replacing him with Rick Wagner, who's not quite as good, is just a move that I wasn't a big fan of. I thought they should have pursued Bulaga a little bit more.
Yeah, the Packers were a huge player in free agency last offseason with the signings of Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, Adrian Amos, Billy Turner. They're paying for that spending spree this offseason as they mostly sat free agency out. They let Blake Martinez walk and replaced him with Christian Kirksey. Keep in mind that Kirksey's 27 and he's played in only 9 games over the past 2 seasons because of multiple injuries. It wasn't even just one. Although you're right, Jack, he has been productive when healthy. Rick Wagner was the Packers' only other major signing. He's not as good as Brian Bulaga, who signed with the Los Angeles Chargers, but I think he came cheap for an experienced NFL tackle.
I think with the Packers, they didn't make many moves, but I actually love them. I think out of this entire division, I think they did the best, and I really love their moves. Like, first of all, I've watched Kirksey play, like, all these Brown games that I've seen. Yeah, you're right. 9 out of 32 games is a bit concerning, but when he does play, he is a true leader on the field, and he was a fan favorite. Like, it was really sad to see him go. And I think he's going to bring in this kind of, dog-like culture that Cleveland is trying to establish into Green Bay. And I think he's a lot of a better leader than Blake Martinez was. Martinez was a good linebacker. I really liked his kind of pedigree, but I mean, when you're getting Christian Kirksey, I think you're getting a player that like knows his role and he's willing to fight for his teammates. So I think that was a great signing. I mean, you didn't get him for that expense. It wasn't as expensive as I thought they were going to have to pay for him. So I think it was a great signing. And then Devin Funchess, I don't know why people weren't hyping on this more. I really like the signing. I think he's a great number 2. And with Cam Newton there, he was a great deep threat and a great red zone target. And you already have one to Devontae Adams. I mean, that is lethal. Like with Aaron, you give Aaron Rodgers 2 red zone threats that can, go over the top like that, especially Devin Funchess, who is actually one of the better one-on-one receivers we have in this league. So I think that was a great pickup. And then Rick Wagner, I think, is one of the best replacements you can get for Bulaga, considering he is a big loss. And I think you get an experienced tackle who knows his role, who's played in big games before, obviously with the Lions in the playoffs. And you're getting him in that division. So he is familiar with the Packers kind of system, and he is familiar with the NFC North lifestyle. So I think it was a decent replacement. So they didn't make that many moves, but the moves they made, I think they weren't, over the top. They weren't anything that was going to wow you. But I think for Aaron Rodgers' sake, like you get, 2 pieces that can really help this offense that was kind of struggling. I think it was pretty good for the Packers considering what they had to deal with and what they just accomplished with the NFC Championship run. So if we're going to start with grades, I'm going to give him a B, but I think it really depends on how Funchess fits in. If Funchess fits in better, I think we can look back on this and give him like a B plus A minus. So I'm going to give him a B.
I'm going to be more harsh. I'm going to give him a C. I think if Kirksey can stay healthy, he will be a key player on the Packers defense. Wagner is a solid replacement for Bulaga. I agree with you there, Anish. Although I think Green Bay will lose some substance at the position, I think Aaron Rodgers needs more passing game weapons as he continues to age. Like, Funchess is cool, but, like, I don't think the Packers have done that much on that front. Luckily,
we say this all the time, though. We say, Rodgers needs more help. Rodgers needs more help. I think he has I agree, but I think he has a decent amount of targets, though. I think Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are good, serviceable running backs, and we saw that last year. And I think Devontae Adams is a top, he's borderline top 5. And I'm not mad if someone puts him in top 5. I think he's a great receiver who's been able to, make his own as a number 1. And now that you add Funchess, I think this is enough help. Like, maybe in the draft you can address it, sure, but I think Funchess and Adams would be a great, great tandem. Because Funchess is going from Cam Newton to Aaron Rodgers, and in terms of passing, like pass accuracy, that's a big step up. So I think Funchess is going to have a lot of fun in the system. So, yeah, he's also been questionable with injuries and all. These signings are, it's hard to replace Brian Bulaga, and it's going to be hard to replace Blake Martinez. But these are some, high-risk, high-reward type scenarios, and I think the reward's going to pay off for them later next year because, let's face it, Aaron Rodgers, his clock is starting. He's starting – his time is numbered, and I think these signings are showing that, hey, we're still in this. We're still a Super Bowl contender. We can easily beat any team in the NFL. So I think – I think just keep in mind those, and also they didn't have much to work with. They didn't have as much cap space or as much freedom to work with. So I think for that's why I gave him a B. But yeah, continue with what you guys get.
Yeah, I was just about to say, luckily there's still some receiving talent on the free agent market, and this year's draft class is deep in that regard as well. So I'm gonna give him a C.
Yeah, to add on to that, I'd love to see the Packers draft a wide receiver first round, like maybe Laviska Shenault or Justin Jefferson if he's still on the board, but I think that would really add on to Devin Funchess and especially keeping Aaron Rodgers, keeping weapons around him because he is getting older, and I hate to say it, but he needs those weapons, and he can't just be relying on Devontae Adams every single time. So
what about a strong safety? Because I think it's Kevin King or one of them. One of them is Service and Amos.
Kevin King's a corner.
I'd rather go receiver. I'd rather go receiver on the Packers.
It's tough because Amos is a really good safety, but Kevin King is a corner was what I meant to say. I think maybe you can get a possible corner there, or maybe even Delpit because he's kind of like a hybrid to kind of help out Jair and Amos.
I wouldn't touch Delpit in the first round if I were.
Yeah, I'd wait till
team.
Second.
Yeah,
I think a good receiver for the Packers. You mentioned Laviska Shenault. I like Denzel Mims from Baylor too. I think he'll be available.
Me too, but I really want him to fall into the second round so the Jets can draft him. No, I think Justin Jefferson would be a perfect fit for the Packers because I think in their mentality in the draft needs to be to draft a number 2 receiver. I think Funchess is a good signing as a number 3. I just can't see him as a number 2. But Adams, Jefferson, and Funchess with those two running backs, Jones and blanking on the other one. But I think that'd be a pretty good offense. I just can't see Funchess as a number 2 receiver right now, which is what he is currently. So I'm going to give the Packers, I think, a B-. If Kirksey and Funchess stay on the field and play well, I mean, that can go all the way up to an A-. But if they don't, it can go all the way down to maybe a D. Like the Packers have one of the weirdest off seasons to me because it can either be very good or very bad.
Yeah, it's one of those high risk, high reward. But I think with what you said about Funchess, like, again, he's more of an outside guy. So I mean, Jefferson, I didn't watch much of him, but I did see his tape. I mean, he can play in the slot. So I think you want to look for someone that can go in the slot, especially because Adams is such a hybrid in that regard. But I think I would like to have him on the outside more than in the slot, like what he played towards kind of the end of the season. But I think Adams and Funchess on the outside again. I really like that combo, and if you can get a slot receiver in the draft, I think that's fine. But also address Kevin King did not have a good year, and I think if you can get a good compliment to Jair in the first round, I think you're really helping out Aaron Rodgers with his defense.
Nick, what would you give him?
For my grade, I give him like a C+, B-, and just because I'm still questionable because two of our 3 signings are coming off of injuries, and that's why I'm hesitant to give him anything higher than a B-, just because of the risk there. But like you said, it could potentially be really good if they both are able to play the full season.
Would you say they got better
really
or worse?
I'd say they got better because Christian Kirksey is definitely better than Blake Martinez if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do like Devin Funchess on the field next to Devontae Adams.
In a perfect scenario, they did get better if those two stay on the field. But the problem is it's hard to bank on players not getting injured, but it's also impossible to predict. So we'll see what happens. This Packers offseason could turn out to be one of the best, just based on the talent per signing, even though they didn't make very many. But a team that had a lot of things happen to them was the Vikings. What do you guys think of them?
Yeah, I think the Vikings experienced a mass exodus of players this offseason. Some won't be missed, though. Xavier Rhodes was a liability in the secondary, and Linval Joseph had been providing diminishing productivity, in my opinion. You know, he had fewer tackles in each of the last 3 seasons and only 7.5 combined sacks. However, Everson Griffin was productive as a pass rusher, 8 sacks last season. And then I think the secondary will need to be almost entirely rebuilt. Tagging Anthony Harris kept at least one foundational piece of the secondary in place. As long as the team doesn't trade him, he will be a stabilizing presence. And I think Michael Pierce figures to be an upgrade over Joseph.
I think with the Vikings, well, first, like when I look at these grades and when I give them and I look at these teams' free agency, I kind of look at what they had to work with because unfortunately it's just teams are presented in a worse scenario than others. So this team did make the divisional round this year. They had that amazing playoff game against New Orleans. So it's going to be hard to kind of repeat that with this core that they have. I don't see Kirk Cousins taking this team to the Super Bowl or even an NFC championship game. I think the loss of Everson Griffin is going to be huge because he has been a very solid piece for them for a very long time. Linval Joseph, I think also they will miss him. I think he is also kind of that anchor to that defensive line. And one guy you guys won't really mention, but like I don't know if you guys would have talked about this, but like Zendejo, the safety is a huge loss. I think like it's a really kind of under the radar loss that people aren't mentioning because he was a great compliment to Harrison Smith. He was a great tackler in the box. And fortunately, my Browns got him. But I think for the Vikings, that's going to be a big loss because you kind of had these 3, just great safeties that all complemented each other in Harris, Smith, and Zendejo. And when Harris comes, I think Harris is going to stay, but I think they won't be able to keep him long term with this cap hit they're having. And they kind of dug themselves in a deeper hole with extending Kirk Cousins. I think he's fine for now because he showed me that he can win a big game. I still remember I was telling Nick and Jack, we were watching the Packers-Vikings game together, and we were all like, yeah, Kirk Cousins just can't win a big game. But I think the one against New Orleans, I think he proved a lot of haters wrong in that regard. So I think the extension was fine. But I think with these signings, it was like there wasn't anything that like really impressed me. And I think what they had to work with was kind of tough. But the one thing I did like was the Diggs trade because I think kind of what I talk about is like how when people make trades, it's usually a team that gets the best player wins it, but they were able to get a first-round pick and more for Stephon Diggs, who's, he's a top 10. I think we can say that, borderline top 10. And they got more for him than the Texans did with Hopkins. So I'd say that's a win in my book. And with that first round pick, they have a lot of things they can do. They can either trade back, they can get more assets, and they can try and escape this deadly cap hit that they have, because I think they're still negative, and that is really, really bad going into, next year's free agency and even into this season, because there is going to be a lot of guys available next year. And I don't see them getting better. And I think in a division, I forgot to mention this with the Packers, but I think in this division, I think the Packers with their moves kind of shortened the gap. Like they kind of extended the gap between them and the Vikings, because it was pretty close last year and the Vikings came a game away from kind of steering the division. Obviously the Packers won that game, but I think the gap has really increased over this offseason.
Yeah, so I think that they definitely had a lot of major losses. Like Stephon Diggs, yeah, they did get some good. They got a first round and a third round for him, but he's still a big loss. He's still a good receiver that they're losing. They also Everson Griffin. He's been a solid pass rusher for them. So I think that's another huge loss. And also Sendeo, Anishi touched on it a bit. I think I like the Anthony Harris, Sendeo safeties, and then that's gone too. But I do think they made the good move with tagging Anthony Harris, because in my opinion, he's one of the most dominant safeties in the league. And we've had this argument before, but I still think he is. So personally, I just don't see how much they gained besides the draft picks from Diggs. And I don't think they did a good job this free agency.
They might have to trade Harris too. Like, just keep that in mind, because they're really under the cap.
True.
They have the
I hope
worst
they
cap
don't,
situation
though.
in the league. I think they might have to.
If they do trade Harris, this is even worse. I'll start with the grades. I'll start with the grades. I'm going to give him a D-. I'm going to be really harsh. Because, look, the Vikings made a huge commitment to Kirk Cousins with a 2-year extension worth $66 million. He's going to carry a cap hit of $21 million in 2020, but that number jumps up to $45 million in 2022. Like, that's not a joke. And that kind of obligation, that tells you the Vikes are all in on the next few years. But the rest of their moves, it made Minnesota look like a team in rebuilding mode. It lost a ton of talent on the defense and couldn't do much to replace it. Trading Stephon Diggs for a first-round pick, it would have made sense if the team acknowledged it was rebuilding. It didn't, in light of the Cousins extension. So that's why I'm giving him as harsh of a grade as I am.
See, the problem I have with
– oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the problem I have with extending Cousins for that much money is, what's the point of doing that if you're a team that really wants to pound the rock and run the ball with Dalvin Cook a bunch? Like, I understand that's why I think they traded Diggs. Is A, they needed to, and B, I think they realized that Dalvin Cook is where their best offense is. But then why do you go pay Kirk Cousins this much money after he's already making so much money in the past? And then just losing damn near your entire defense. It's going to be really hard for the Vikings to bounce back after this. I thought they had a couple good moves, like signing Michael Pierce. I think that's an upgrade from Linval Joseph, and then re-signing Dan Bailey, who solved the long kicker problem in Minnesota. So I'm going to give him a D+ because those couple signings saved them from an F. But I just really didn't understand what the Vikings were doing. Because Shrikar, you touched on it. They look like a rebuilding team that hasn't accepted their rebuilding, and I just don't know what their offensive identity is going to be next year with Cook, who's a really good running back, but then Cousins is making just so much money that they kind of have to use it.
With the Vikings, I think, again, I'm just going to start off and say my grade before I kind of defend it, but I give them a bit of a generous one. I give them a C- because, again, what they had to work with was very little. And also, I love the Pierce signing. I forgot to touch on that, but I think that's a great replacement for Joseph. And I think with the loss of a lot of their defensive playmakers, their direction is just downward, but like in the sense that they're probably going to have to trade Harris, and they're just so under the cap, and they haven't done anything to kind of change that, because they're trying to switch from old to young talent, but they're still keeping all the big cap hits that they have on this team. And I think they did. And to touch on Dalvin Cook, like first of all, they did keep CJ Ham, who was a really serviceable fullback for them. But again, like we didn't touch on, so I think the loss of Kevin Stefanski is going to be huge, because he was their offensive mind that kind of helped develop Kirk Cousins and even Case Keenum when he was there. So I think that's a big loss to change, because Mike Zimmer is not an offensive-minded guy. So Stefanski is something that brings in some questions. And I think Dalvin Cook, I don't really like him as much as you guys were saying, because towards the end of the year, he was averaging under 4 yards a carry. So, yeah, I think he had some minor shoulder injury, I think. But still, like, that's after week 11, under 4 yards a carry is not the star talent that we saw the first 10 weeks. So, I mean, Dalvin Cook is also a bit of concern to me because their O-line, they did not do much to do it. I think they signed Ben Jones, I think. But besides that, they didn't do much to the offensive line, which already wasn't that good. So I think they should address offensive line in the draft with the extra picks that they have. And if they can, my grade could go up to a C. But for now, I think it's a C-. And I think Dalvin Cook has some questions. I think if you can get a receiver with those 2 picks, if you can get an offensive lineman and a receiver, that would be great. But the problem is that's where a lot of teams are shooting for. A lot of teams want either an O-lineman or a receiver. So it's a bit kind of a lot of concern there. But if you can find a good complement,
too.
Yep, yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of questions on this team. I really see them taking a big step back. I think they could potentially go from second to third into this division.
As a Packers fan, I love to see the Vikings get significantly worse after this offseason, and I give them a D, and that's pretty fitting considering all they lost, and they really didn't gain much besides Michael Pierce. And I really don't agree with the extending Kirk Cousins because I don't think he's a good quarterback, but it's another debate.
Well, you are a Packers fan, so
yeah.
I mean he's won one big game,
but
so he's won a big game now. So
I do see this team getting third next year. I think the Bears are going to leapfrog the Vikings in this division.
Yep.
And they might challenge the Packers. I think the Bears are.
Wow. What?
It'll be interesting because there's no way they're going to have worse quarterback play than last year. Foles or Trubisky is going to play better than Trubisky played last year. So I just say watch out for the Bears at least.
I agree in that sense, but still, like, there's a lot of questions in terms of other receiving talent besides Robinson, and they didn't win that many big games this year. So they're going to be a bit more in prime time, and I think, you know, it's a bit of concern. Like, I like what they did. Again, just they could have done better, but I think we can all agree here. I think the Vikings did make major mishaps this offseason. I think they're going to slip.
Yeah, so we moved from a division that had few good off seasons to a division that I think had a bunch of them. So thank you, Nick, for joining us. We're going to be moving on to the AFC North now.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And our first team in the AFC North, let's talk about the Ravens, probably the best offense in the league last year. And this time they decided to upgrade on defense over the offseason. What do you guys think of the moves they made?
Yeah, as a Super Bowl contender, the Ravens should be in win now mode. And as one of the better run franchises in the NFL, they somehow found a way to also do some building for the future. Calais Campbell is a major upgrade along the defensive line. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler who can help push the pocket. The Ravens' decision to franchise tag Matthew Judon and re-sign Jihad Ward shows the importance they've placed on the front seven. Hayden Hurst is a talented player, but the emergence of Mark Andrews last season makes him more valuable to the Falcons. Netting a second-round pick in the package for him allows Baltimore to address a position of need higher in the draft. I definitely think they won that trade. So overall, I really like this offseason by Baltimore.
The Ravens, I hate having to play them twice a year. I mean, this team did some amazing things. Like Derek Wolfe, you didn't touch on that. That was a great signing that you got for really cheap. And I mean, the list goes on. I mean, Justin Ellis was a good signing, I think. But Calais Campbell, you got for a 5th-round pick, and he's not aging yet. He's not slowing down anytime soon. I think last year was kind of a down year, but like still, I mean, he still, I believe, had 4 forced fumbles or something like that, which is still really, really good. And yeah, the sack numbers were down, but I think along this D-line, are you kidding me? This is great for him. I mean, you get Derek Wolfe, Judon, Calais Campbell on that D-line, and you only had to give up a 5th-round pick. And not only that, you got it right back along with the 2nd-round pick for Hayden Hurst. I'm sorry, but like, I don't know what the Falcons were thinking there. Hayden Hurst is nowhere near Austin Hooper's level. And Hayden Hurst was like, honestly, he was like a tight end 3 for them. I forget the other tight end name that they have. I think it's Boyle.
Nick Boyle.
Nick Boyle.
Exactly. So I think he actually was more serviceable than Hurst, in my opinion, just because of his run blocking prowess. And Mark Andrews was a Pro Bowler last year. I think he's only going to get better from here. And Lamar Jackson, again, my whole question with him is he hasn't shown up in the playoffs. And for a quarterback that is so huge for me, but, I mean, have they really done anything wrong on defense and even offense? Like, you're going to have a lot of picks to invest in this offense, whether it be receiver to go along with Marquise Brown or even strengthen up the offensive line, which, I mean, obviously the only thing that's preventing me from making this the best free agency was the loss of Yonda. That was absolutely huge and heartbreaking. And I think, you know, with this team, it's just can you get over the hump? Like they were able to get Anthony Levine, keep Jimmy Smith as well. Like this team is really keeping their core intact, and I think a lot better than the Ravens did, or a lot better than the Niners did. And I hate having to play them, but they're going to be really, really, really scary next year. And there really wasn't anything to fault with them, except I think the loss of Yanda was huge, especially because of Lamar's I don't know how to describe this, but like he has a tendency to move right a lot first, then go left. And that protection by Yanda is extremely important because it allows him to get that extra time to make his next step forward to the right, or even switch off to the left and find someone on the left side of the field. So I think that's a huge, huge loss on the offensive line. But other than that, I think this was one of the most stellar free agencies we've seen in a really long time.
Yeah, I loved their two trades. Trading for Calais Campbell and trading away Hayden Hurst for way more than I think his value was.
Oh, yeah.
Signing Derek Wolfe, tagging Matt Judon. I think they extended the best punter in the league in Sam Cook, and then they extended Jimmy Smith for way less than I think he'd get paid by other teams, so that was a steal. The only problem that I see with them is, yeah, they lost two of their best interior players in Yanda and then Michael Pierce on the other side, and I wonder how many years in a row they can go losing their middle linebackers, letting Patrick Owasso go this year.
Yep.
They're going to have to keep rebuilding there, but I think maybe Patrick Queen or Kenneth Murray in the draft will solve that right up.
Yeah.
So I liked what the Ravens did. I had B+. I'm kind of leaning towards A-, but I'll stick with B+, but it could go up based on how I think, especially Derek Wolfe plays, because I think if he plays the way that I think he will, this is going to raise it to an A-.
I'm going to give him an A-. I think the Ravens kept who they needed to, Judon. And I definitely think they upgraded from Michael Pierce and Chris Wormley. They spent money and draft capital to improve the defensive line, but ended up with more ammo in the draft by trading away a redundant asset in Hurst. I feel like Eric DaCosta, their general manager, he deserves so much credit.
Yeah.
He deserves so much applause. He is one of the best GMs in the league, second to John Lynch. Or actually, that's up for debate. But honestly, I feel like they're both great GMs. I definitely think he won again this offseason.
I think replacing Ozzie Newsome as the former GM was kind of hard to do, but I think the Ravens did it well. My grade was, if it wasn't a loss for Yanda, this could have been an AA+, but I'm gonna go with A- like you guys were giving them, just because their moves were really good and just the way they were able to kind of keep their core intact while also adding players that like they have veteran leadership. They've been on playoff runs. They've been very serviceable to the point where they can make Pro Bowl selections, and to now keep this defensive core, which the Ravens have always had. They've always had a defensive mentality, and they're just keeping that old ground and pound, hard on defensive shell. And I mean, they really, what is there to change? And yeah, the loss of Michael Pierce was kind of sad, but you replaced him with Calais Campbell, who's easily a top 5 defensive tackle, maybe even top 3 right now. So I really didn't see the loss of Pierce to be that big. So, I mean, I'm going to go with A- here. I would have bumped it up to an A, but Yanda is a huge loss because you guys know how I am about offensive line. And the Ravens definitely had a top 5, top 3 unit this year. I think it's going to go down next year. And that's the one thing. Wow, really? I think it's up for debate. I think it's up for debate.
Both their tackles and then Yanda on the inside. I can't, other than maybe the
I agree
Colts,
with that.
I can't think.
I think top 3. I'm keeping them top 3. I think the Eagles had a really good one this year.
The Saints
Pittsburgh
too.
is still up there. The Saints as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that last year, I mean, they had 12 Pro Bowlers. So, I mean, to add another one and potentially more with all these, like Derek Wolfe can easily be a Pro Bowler with all this help he has around his D lineman, around this defensive line. So, I'm gonna go with A-, but this can easily go up to an A depending on how these pieces fit in. But again, my question, there are still concerns with this team. Can Lamar produce in the playoffs? And how will he do now that some teams have figured him out, especially like the Titans did? Or teams are going to look at that film and they're going to see what his tendency is, like especially when he runs out of the pocket. And obviously the loss of the O-line is, again, Yanda has been there so consistently. Like, I can't stress that enough. I think he's easily the best offensive guard in the game for the last 10 years. So
he is.
That is a huge deal, and I think I can't stress that enough. So Lamar Jackson's going to have a bit of a problem there, but other than that, I mean, their defense can easily be a top 3 unit. So I'm going to give them an A-.
And then we move on to the Bengals, who had the first pick in the draft, and they made some sneaky good moves. What do you think, Srigar?
Yeah, let's start with the good. Retaining AJ Green on the franchise tag was the right call. Joe Burrow, he's going to be the presumptive quarterback next year. He's going to have a legitimate number one receiving option. And the Bengals do not have to commit to him long term. Keep in mind, AJ Green is 31 years old. I feel like DJ Reader is Cincinnati's best free agent signing in recent memory. The team rarely opens the checkbook for proven talent hitting their primes. He's going to pair with Geno Atkins to create a formidable duo on the inside. Trey Waynes is less exciting, and I think that investment will likely come back to haunt the Bengals. They made him the 6th highest paid corner in the league, which is expensive for someone who was PFF's 45th ranked corner last season. And then Xavier Su'a-Filo and Mackenzie Alexander, they were cheap options who will be good enough to fill important roles next season. So it's a decent offseason for the Bengals.
I think the Bengals are just preparing for Joe Burrow to arrive there. I think they're just preparing for kind of a new rebuilding phase. I don't like Zach Taylor. I think they should potentially think about moving on from him. Although it's only been a year, I think he's not the right fit there. They signed 2 Vikings corners, and I think Alexander is the better of the 2. So I don't know why they gave him a 1-year deal, and Trey Waynes, I believe it was a 3-year deal. So I don't understand that decision. I mean, the Bengals have been very people are thinking this team is really bad. No, they've made the playoffs 5 times last decade. That's pretty impressive. I think only a handful of teams can say that. So they've shown signs of consistently being good. And I think franchise tagging AJ Green, I mean, it just shows that they're trying to give Joe Burrow as many offensive weapons as they can, because potentially, I mean, you can have a really good big 3 here with Burrow, Green, Mixon, and then to add on top of that, John Ross and Tyler Boyd, and not to mention their offensive tackle that they drafted with the 11th pick.
Jonah Williams.
Yeah, he's coming back. So there's a lot of upside here, and I think just some of the signings I think were a bit questionable, but they didn't have to go all out in free agency. That's why I think they did what they could, and I think they're just preparing for a quarterback culture change.
Yeah, everyone has been talking about will Burrow actually want to go to the Bengals? I don't see a problem with that. I'd rather go to the Bengals than a lot of the other teams in this draft. I mean, they have Jonah Williams, who people are forgetting about. They have 2 great receivers in Green and Boyd, and then now they've used this free agency period to shore up their defense. I love the DJ Reader signing, and I think they have a sneaky underrated secondary now with Von Bell, Jesse Bates.
Yep.
They already had William Jackson, and I think
Mackenzie and Drake Kirkpatrick, I believe.
Yeah. And then I think Mackenzie Alexander is a great slot option who can also play on the outside or even safety if they need him to. So I really liked what the Bengals did, but I don't know whether I can put him as a B+ or A-. I think I'm gonna go low B+ right now, just because I think that they could have gotten better, maybe a little bit more on the offense, especially the interior offensive line.
I'm gonna give him a solid B. The Reader signing is exciting, but someone like Joe Schobert would have put this class over the top. And improving its 29th ranked defense is one of the best things the franchise can do for Burrow under Zach Taylor, who's in his 2nd year. Cincinnati could have done more to upgrade, but it is likely on a multi-year rebuild. It can afford to be a little more patient. So yeah, I think it's a decent offseason all around. I'm gonna give him a B.
I think the Bengals, I think they're just preparing for Burrow to come in, and honestly, this is one of the best teams to go to if I'm Joe Burrow.
Exactly.
Teams. It's
exactly, yeah.
Again, they've had a winning culture before, and it's not all gone. You still have a top, when he's healthy, I think we can all agree he's a top 5 to top 7 receiver in AJ Green. He's
maybe
been
not
very
anymore,
productive.
But yeah.
Not anymore, but I think top 7. I think that's a pretty decent assumption to keep him in there.
But he's a legitimate number 1 option.
Exactly.
No question.
And Boyd can grow into a number 1 option.
Yep. And also John Ross is a really good slot receiver. He is insanely fast. I think if he just can be healthy, we saw it the first 3 weeks of the year. I believe he had 4 touchdowns, an insane amount of receiving yardage. So when healthy, he's really
with
electric.
Consistent quarterback play yet.
Exact. And if Joe Burrow can be the consistent quarterback we saw for a year, I think that's something that could be great. But again, I do have some questions about Joe Burrow. I'm sure we're going to get to draft outlooks later, but I think, we kind of saw this with Dwayne Haskins. 1 year of being a full-time starter is not enough. And I think Joe Burrow's 1 year, it was really, really electric. Don't get me wrong. But I think there's some questions there is all I'm saying. But even then, I mean, you get into a system with Joe Mixon as your running back, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, and John Ross, and not only all the defensive pickups that they made, I think this is a great system. I don't know why people are saying you should pull an Eli Manning with a team that's made the playoffs 5 times in the last 10 years. So
Yeah.
I think in terms of grades, I'm going to give him a B- just because I think Schobert would have put them over the top. And also, like, they didn't the Trey Waynes over Mackenzie Alexander thing was very disheartening for me. I'm all about decisions here. And they easily could have given Mackenzie Alexander a better contract than they could have because if anything, Trey Waynes needs the 1-year test more than Alexander does. So
yeah, they overpaid for Trey Waynes.
Yeah, a top, like you said, Shrikar, top 6 cornerback money. I'm sorry that he's nowhere near that.
Much.
So I'm gonna give him a B for the Bengals. But I mean, I think they're trending in the right direction. I think we can all agree there. I mean, especially up from 2-14, where everyone kind of saw them heading last year. So I mean, this is a team that we can easily see. I think they can upset some teams next year, and I think give them 2 to 3 years, and this team could easily go back to the playoffs.
Yeah, the problem is they're in, I think, the second best division in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's any way that they won't come in last place, but that doesn't mean they're not on the right path. Just because I think the Steelers, Browns, and Ravens will be so good next year, I just can't see the Bengals leapfrogging any of them. Anish, you want to start us off with the Browns?
Oh man, I'm so excited. I hate to say it because every time I get excited, they let me down. But I mean, this was one of the best free agencies I think the Browns have ever had. And I mean, the list goes on. They signed Austin Hooper, then Jack Conklin, which was one of my favorite signings, and then the one I was questionable about, Case Keenum. I mean, I don't know why you gave him $6 million a year, but I mean, there was Kevin Johnson, who I like because he was a former first-round pick. Andrew Billings, a defensive tackle for depth. Adrian Claiborne, more depth. Like, I mean, they're just, and they, you know what's funny? Like, they still have the most cap space in the NFL right now at $43 million. And I think you guys will touch on this more than I will, but Jadeveon Clowney, there was reports that the Browns are interested in him. And if they were to cut Vernon and sign Clowney for about $17 million a year, that's only a $1 million increase. So they will still have an insane amount of cap space. And the upgrade of Clowney over Vernon, that just makes me really excited because that's a huge, huge upgrade on the defensive line. And you get Claiborne as depth, and you still have Ogunjobi and Chad Thomas, and
you
now
get
you
Garrett
get Andrew
back.
Billings. And you get Myles Garrett back, who had 10 sacks in 10 games and 39 quarterback pressures. That is huge. And I think Jack Conklin is a great pickup just because I know, Jack, you don't like him as much, but he was a first-team All-Pro as a rookie, and he's just entering his prime after what he did, helping Tannehill go 7-3 as a starter in the regular season and helping Derrick Henry go on this illustrious playoff run, I think was huge. And Austin Hooper, I believe they did overpay for him, which I didn't like as much. But the thing is, Kevin Stefanski loves running these 2 tight end sets, as Shrikar mentioned. And I think what he did with Rudolph and Ish Smith, and I'm sorry, but Hooper and David Njoku are way better than that combo. And I think we just lost Ricky Seals-Jones. So I think David Njoku, I don't like him being a second tight end. I think we can easily trade him for like a 3rd round pick and get a better one maybe in the draft in the later rounds. But if you want to keep him, sure, like pick up his 5th-year option and then maybe have him let him go next year, I think that's fine. But I mean, all the other signings, man, like this, I mean, BJ Goodson, and sorry, I forgot to mention Zendejo and Carl Joseph, I think are 2 great safeties that we addressed. I think the only problem is we definitely need to hit linebacker more in the draft because I like Mac Wilson, but like the loss of Kirksey and Schobert are huge, huge losses. I think linebackers are the only thing we need to focus on right now in the draft besides left tackle. But I mean, man, this was a great, great free agency because they finally addressed the needs that are important. Like, you didn't have to go get a second running back last year in Kareem Hunt. You didn't have to go I mean, honestly, like Odell was, he's like flashy and all, but like really you didn't need him. So I was questionable back then. I mean, obviously he's Odell Beckham. Like, who doesn't love to have a flashy receiver like that? But I think they finally went down in the trenches. They got the needs that they truly need. And Stefanski and Barry, I think, are 2 analytical guys that will really help this front office grow. And they just need to give them a chance.
Yeah, the Browns wasted little time in making big moves. They made Austin Hooper the highest paid tight end in the NFL, giving Baker Mayfield yet another weapon. And then they made sure they could protect him by inking Jack Conklin to a reasonable contract. They did let Justin Burris and Eric Murray walk while Demarius Randall, what team did he go to?
The Raiders.
The Raiders? Okay, yeah. However, they did address the safety position with Carl Joseph and Andrew Zendejo. Kevin Johnson should help in the slot. Yeah, I agree, Anish. Linebacker is the one area where the Browns failed to improve. Joe Schobert would have been an expensive investment, and the team was ready to move on from Christian Kirksey. But B.J. Goodson can only account for so much. The Browns, they're going to miss Schobert's coverage ability. But overall, I think it's a really good offseason, one of my favorites thus far.
Yeah, I think they made some really good moves. The only problems I see is I don't know how much they needed Austin Hooper. Like, I know Stefanski likes to run 2 tight end sets, but did you really need to go out, even with Njoku, and get the highest paid tight end in the league? And then Conklin, I'm not sure if he fits their offensive line and what they needed. Because, they needed pass protection, and that's really not Conklin's strength. I think he's a much better run blocker. We saw what he did for Derrick Henry, and I don't think that's what the Browns needed on the offensive line. They need to protect Baker, and I just don't think Conklin, for what he's being paid, I don't think he's going to give them the pass protection that they want. So I think Bulaga probably would have been a better investment for their money if they wanted to protect Baker. But as a long-term move, I can see Conklin panning out a little bit more than Bulaga. So I'm going to give him an A-. I think that they had an A, except for the fact that I think they just invested a little bit too much money in Hooper and Conklin.
I'm going to give him an A. A solid A. I think Hooper's 4-year, $42 million contract is the only dubious one from a money standpoint. But, once the likes of George Kittle and Travis Kelce get their next deals, there's a good chance that money won't look as bad. Conklin was a great value, in my opinion, at 3 years and $42 million, considering he was the best tackle on the market. And with the new coaching staff, it makes sense that the Browns have outgoing talent. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry will want to bring in familiar guys like Sendejo, who spent time in Minnesota with Stefanski and in Philadelphia with Berry. So overall, I really like this offseason from the Browns. I think they're definitely going to improve. I'm going to give them a solid A.
I think with the Browns, it's please, could this be the year? Could this finally be the year they break through? And I'm really hoping it is. I'm not going to get my hopes up too much because I still need to see this whole thing shift out. But like I was saying with the Jets, you can't just reset the entire line. And I think they did a great job because they're keeping their guards and their centers the same with Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, and J.C. Treader. And they're just investing in the 2 positions that they don't need as much of chemistry issues, but it's just they're really important in the 2 tackles. Mm-hmm. So you can easily get a good one in the draft. I think Thomas is really good. I think Wirfs is a good option. You can maybe make Wills a left tackle. I mean, I don't really know, but I think
Wirfs would not work for the Browns because, again, he's another one that's mostly a run blocker, and he really only plays on the right. So unless you're going to slide Conklin over to left, I don't think Wirfs can play left tackle in the NFL, just personally.
That's a good point because I think they were thinking of playing him at guard. So I think Wirfs is interesting, but I think Thomas is a very solid left tackle. Mm-hmm. That was the number 1 tackle on the board. I don't know why his stock slipped as much. You guys can maybe point to that.
He just didn't have a great year compared to a lot of the other guys. And once offensive line stock starts going down and other people's going up, it's kind of rapid because everyone jumps on the train.
Yeah,
you saw that. But
I think I would totally be fine with Andrew Thomas. I'm totally fine with that because he played in the SEC. And look at the running backs that Georgia have produced. I mean, Swift is coming out of this year's draft. Obviously he's going to work again with Nick Chubb, which is great. And Sony Michel also from Georgia. So Thomas has seen, and also they face really good defenses in the SEC. So I'm fine with Thomas. And Wills again in Alabama. I think he can easily make the switch to left. So I'm okay with tackle there. I think it's just. Now, Baker really has no excuses. This is his year. It's his 3rd year, and his contract's coming up soon. So this is where we have him on a rookie contract. This is when he needs to step up and really produce for this team because their schedule is a lot easier than it was last year. Last year we had to play the NFC West, the AFC East, and I think this year we played the NFC least is what I call them because they really just don't have a consistent winner ever. So. I really like our schedule this year. So I'm going to give them an A to an A-. Just it really depends on what they can do in the draft and what tackle they get. But again, I don't think we touched on this enough, but Jadeveon Clowney, if they can get him for 17 to 18 mil a year and cut Vernon, I'm sorry, but that is a huge, huge upgrade. And you still have cap space. These deals, a lot of these deals that we mentioned are 1-year deals, with Carl Joseph, Billings, Kevin Johnson. So these are all players that we can potentially get rid of next year if they don't pan out. The only commitments we made are Conklin and Hooper, who are young guys who are just entering their primes. And Hooper's a great red zone target that we needed. So the 1-year deals I was totally fine with. The only commitments are Conklin and Hooper. and Case Keenum, which that I really didn't see the point there. I don't know if
I
Stefanski
disagree
just
with you on
wanted
that
him.
one. I think
What do you like
he'll
about
be
him?
a good. I like him just being a mentor, to Baker. I think that Baker really needed that in Cleveland, and I think that Keenum will know what Stefanski's trying to do as a coach, and I think that he'll just be a good mentor for Baker. And $6 million a year, is that what you said, for a quarterback?
Yeah.
Isn't bad.
I guess so, but like for 3 years, I don't see why you have to give it for 3 years. Like
Who was
like
their
1
backup? Who was their backup before him?
Drew Stanton. So
Yeah, so I mean,
like, yeah.
if Baker goes down, Keenum's so much better than Drew Stanton, and
Yeah.
Baker being.
Oh, sorry,
he
Garrett
needs someone
Gilbert too. We had Garrett Gilbert as well, but yeah, like neither of them are.
I
as
just
good
think
as Case
Baker
Keenum.
needed some supervision and needed a mentor, and I think that's what
Yeah.
Keenum will be for him. So I don't mind that decision to bring him in.
I hope so. I think with this team, it's like, can they finally put it all together? We've been saying that for so long, and I mean, they have, like, I really don't see any problem with this team except linebacker, but I really like Mac Wilson. So, like, can you just put it all together, please? And if they can get, again, Clowney is a big wild card for me. I think, like, he's, like, no one's offering him anything. And I think Seattle's holding firm. Like, they're not going to spend that much because they don't have the cap space freedom that the Browns have. And, I mean, if I was Jadeveon Clowney, I would love to play with Garrett alongside me and have Larry Ogunjobi and Adrian Claiborne and Andrew Billings and all these guys come off the edge with me. And like, this is a really scary team if they can just, again, it really just comes down to Baker Mayfield and Kevin Stefanski and how this
And
works.
coaching,
But,
yeah.
So like, but I think Stefanski and Andrew Berry are great pickups in the front office, and Alex Van Pelt, who is actually making Baker switch his footwork this year. So instead of going back with his right foot, I believe, he's making him go back with his left foot, which worked with Aaron Rodgers and Andy Dalton. So I think it's a great move by the Browns in their front office this year. But like I said, let's just hope they put it all together.
Yeah. And so we'll move on to the Steelers, who didn't have a lot of moves, but I was actually kind of a fan of what they did.
Yeah, I think the Steelers had to be resourceful if they wanted to have a successful offseason, since they were one of the teams with the least to spend, yet they still found a way to make up for most of the talent they lost. Essentially, faced with choosing between Javon Hargrave and Bud Dupree, the team opted to tag Dupree. He'll once again team with TJ Watt to create, in my opinion, one of the best pass rushing duos in the league. 26 sacks last season, like that's nuts. And then while Hargrave left, Pittsburgh, they worked on an intra-division trade to get Chris Wormley. He's never been more than a rotational player, but that's likely what he'll be asked to do with the Steelers. Eric Ebron was such an underrated signing. He flashed his talent as an athletic receiver who can create mismatches downfield in 2018. And, with a change of scenery and Big Ben throwing him the ball, it's easy to envision a rejuvenation. The Steven Wisniewski signing, it showed the eye the Steelers have for value. He came to the club on the cheap, and he can play guard, he can play center at a high level. So overall, I think Pittsburgh had a decent offseason considering the situation they were thrown into.
I think with Pittsburgh, it's like when I talk about the three things that make up a team, they're one of the most consistent teams in having that: quarterback, coach, and offensive line. They still have Mike Tomlin there, who managed to take a team with Duck, a quarterback named Duck as your starter, to 8-8, and they were 8-5 if it weren't for that loss to Buffalo, and it kind of just spiraled from down there. But 8-5 with a really good chance of making the playoffs with Duck as your quarterback, I mean, that was pretty impressive. So you're only going to get better from that. And Big Ben's coming back, obviously. He's getting up there in age, but I think he still has 1 or 2 years left, depending on how he recovers from that elbow. But it's not like an ACL or an Achilles, so it shouldn't be that devastating to his quarterback play. And you're getting Eric Ebron, like you touched on it, Shrikar. I love the Eric Ebron signing just because he's such a good red zone threat. And I think he's a lot better than Vance McDonald and Jesse James. And also we've seen that with I was watching some old Steeler games actually, and like the way he utilized Heath Miller like a lot throughout his career. I mean, I can really see that with Eric Ebron, who was, again, a first-round pick for a reason. And we saw that with his one season where I believe he had like 13 touchdowns, something insane like that. So he can definitely revitalize his career in Pittsburgh, and the fans will definitely love him. I think getting him for $6 million a year too was pretty good. And I think the signings of I'm all about 50-50 choice, and they chose the right one in Bud Dupree. I think he's a very electrified star, and the good choice there. I can't pronounce the name, but Wisniewski or however you say it. I think he's a good guard that gives you veteran Super Bowl experience. which is something that the team needs. And I think they're well beyond the Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown drama. I think they're well removed from that, which is good. So my question with this team is, like, Juju Smith-Schuster again. Like, can he step up? Like, he didn't step up.
I think he will. Well, but he didn't have quarterback play last year.
I agree. Like, when Big Ben was there in the 2 games, he had 78 yards the first game against Pittsburgh, against, you know, corners like Stephon Gilmore and all that. And in the second game, I forget, but like I think he was well over 70 yards as well. I believe he had a good game against the Seattle Seahawks prior to Big Ben's injury. So, I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster can be that guy, but again, now we've got to see it. Like, we haven't seen it yet. I think he can, but I'm still skeptical about that. And James Conner, this whole thing there, I think they kept their offensive line intact with DeCastro and Marcus Gilbert, I believe, and Marquise Pouncey. So they have their guys on their offensive line. And I think now you just got to find that number 2 receiver. Is it James Washington? Is it Deontay Johnson? Like, who is it? Who's going to step up for them? I think Eric Ebron can easily be a second kind of option in the pass catching game. But yeah, I think their signings were great. Like, just kind of low key signings. Like, again, Zach Banner for depth. I think with terms of grades, I'm going to give them like a C+ because they really didn't do much, but like for what they did pretty decent on. But I think they should have gotten a deal done with Bud Dupree. I think franchise tagging him is good, but like now you got to lock him up because I mean TJ Watt is also coming up, so you've got to take care of both of those guys who are really essential to your team. So I like what the Steelers did. I think they can I can easily see 3 teams from this division making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I like the Steelers defense a lot. They have one of the youngest defenses, and they're on the come up in this league with Minka, Devin Bush, TJ Watt, like a lot of names. So I think that in this draft, if they can focus on offense, they can be deadly next year because they're going to get Big Ben back. We've seen what Eric Ebron can do with good quarterback play when he played with Andrew Luck. And then I just think they need a second receiver. They need someone to prove themselves, and I think they can upgrade at running back in this year's draft. I really like Jonathan Taylor mocks to the Steelers, maybe in round 2 or 3. I think that he'd be really good for them as a complement to James Conner. So this Steelers team and even the Browns, this division is going to be nuts next year because the NFC West and the AFC North, they're going to be ridiculous, and they might dominate the playoffs next year.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give the Steelers a B. This class was nothing special, but considering the situation, the Steelers did the best they could. What's crazy to me is they haven't had a losing season since 2003. So I think they've earned some trust that these signings will work out. So I think it's a decent season overall for the Steelers. I'm going to give them a B.
Yeah, I forgot to get my grade. I'm going to give them a B too because I think they got a little bit better with just maintaining Dupree, who's only going to get better, and then getting Ebron, who is an upgraded tight end. And if he can go back to his last season with Andrew Luck, I think he could be deadly in that offense.
Yep.
So, I mean, what do you guys think next year for this division, though?
Oh, man. I think with this, it's so tough. I mean, I can easily see 3 teams making the playoffs in this division. I think my biggest
I think Baltimore is going to win the division again. I think that's safe to say. The Browns could definitely come up.
See, that's my wild card. The Browns are the wild card here. Like, what can Baker – if Baker can step up and go back to his rookie year, I'm sorry, but, like, that team could be so deadly. Like, you're talking about a tandem of Chubb and Hunt, Odell and Landry, Hooper and Njoku, and obviously we need a number 3. Yeah, two good tackles. And we have 2 good guards as well with Teller and Batonio, and also Hubbard is switching to guard. I think that's going to be a good fit for him. And J.C. Treader kind of keeping that chemistry with Baker Mayfield for the past 2 years. I think that's great. And then you look at the defense. I mean, Garrett, if they can get Clowney, I'm sorry, like Garrett and Clowney could be easily a top 5 defensive end tandem there. I mean, they have a lot of star power, but you got to be a team. You got to be a whole unit together. And I think the signings that they made this season in the free agency class, none of these guys are big name guys who think, oh, I'm the best, or oh, I'm so like I'm gonna take all these sacks. I think Clowney would be an interesting one because I don't know, like he's played with JJ Watt before, so I think he understands his role in a defensive line. But like I think that's the one guy I think that could kind of be a locker room problem. But like, I mean, I really haven't seen much from him as, you know, a bad kind of guy. So, and I think also corner is something that they should think about as well. Like I think Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward were injured last year, so that's something to be addressed. but also look at like Kyle Duggar, I think would be good in
Yeah.
the draft. And Troy Dye from Oregon as a linebacker would be a great pickup. If we can get those two guys in the mid rounds, I think that would be great for the team. So yeah, I think in terms of the outlook for this division, I think the Browns are the one wild card, but I can easily see these three teams getting a winning season and going into the playoffs.
Yeah, this AFC playoff race is going to be ridiculous next year because there are three divisions I can see with 2 or 3 teams possibly making the playoffs. So it's a really good thing. I'm thinking that they upgraded to 7 teams in the playoffs.
Which divisions are those, by the way?
So I mean, I can see the Ravens, Steelers, Browns, the Colts, Texans, and Titans, Bills, and then who am I forgetting?
Patriots.
The
I think
Chargers,
Patriots could make it too.
Patriots are never out
the
of it
Chargers,
until
the
I see it.
Chiefs, the Chargers, the Chiefs, and even the Broncos.
And the
I'm gonna
Raiders
throw
too.
in the
Honestly,
Jets.
the Raiders. Honestly, the
Yeah,
Raiders too.
Raiders
Like,
could.
Raiders.
The
I don't.
AFC
Okay,
is-
I don't see the Jets doing it, but
No,
I
I'm
mean,
just throwing them in there because I want to. But
yeah,
no,
I think
it's
this
just gonna be crazy. It's gonna
I'm
be
so
crazy.
excited. I just
I
hope
know.
it starts on time. But yeah,
I
I'm
know.
so
Yeah.
excited. I'm so
This is-
excited for this playoff.
I
race.
personally like them increasing the playoffs to 7 teams per
Yeah, that's
per
not
conference.
bad.
I know a
It's
lot of
not
people
as bad
complain
as
about it,
people
but
are thinking about it, but I think I think 17 is okay. Just because like now the first seed becomes so much more valuable, and teams are gonna fight for that. Like it's
Yeah.
so much more important, and now the playoffs are gonna be so much more interesting. You're gonna see so many more upsets. Like, can you imagine if a 7 seed beats a 2 seed?
Yeah.
Like that's a huge deal, and I think
Yeah.
the NFL is just only gonna increase their ratings. And think about
it's
it,
gonna
more
make
teams
fantasy
make the
football better
playoffs.
too.
Yeah, more teams make the
Yeah.
playoffs, so more fans are gonna watch. Like, just think about it like that way. Like, let's say like you're a fan of the Bears who are 8-8 this year. Let's say they made the playoffs. You're obviously gonna watch it. Like all Bears fans are gonna watch it now. So the NFL is just doing moves that are gonna like increase their ratings. And as a player, like you have a higher chance of the playoffs. Who wouldn't take that? I think the 17 games is kind of iffy.
Yeah,
I think
it's
that
iffy
one is
for me.
that one's a bit of a concern. But the 17 playoff, I think that's a great move. Like 14 out of 32, I think it's like it gives teams a bit more incentive to now not tank as much, right? Like, I mean,
week
obviously
16 and 17 are going to be a lot more interesting.
Yep. So I'm so excited for the NFL next year, and I think when we talk about these divisions, it's just great.
Yeah, I think the thing with the 17 games is that you're taking out a preseason game, and like don't get it wrong, like preseason games are actually really valuable for like a team because you're gonna get a chance to look at these younger guys, you're gonna get a chance to look at depth, and taking out
think 3
one
is
of those,
enough though, because now you don't have to play your starters. Just don't play them in the preseason.
But
just don't
with
do it.
limited training camp most likely this year because of the outbreak, I think that losing a preseason game as well.
But not this year. You won't lose
but not
it
this year. It's next year.
But not this year, so it's fine.
That's true. So I don't know.
It's
going to be interesting. I'm super excited for the NFL this season, and I think that specifically this division, the AFC North, is going to be one to watch, especially after each team had a good offseason. None of these teams had bad offseasons.
Yeah.
But the NFC North, which you touched on earlier, I didn't like a single one of them really.
Nope. Yeah.
So
I think it's a tale of two divisions, and I think the NFC North, which was one of the most competitive this year, I think it's going to take a big change. And the AFC North, watch out. I mean, these 3 teams, and even the Bengals, like you never know with Joe Burrow. Like, what if he comes in there and just lights it up, and Bengals go like 7-9 or something like that, and all of a sudden it's like 4 teams who are very comparable. So I think it's really exciting.
They're all increasing too. They're all going up.
Yep.
I mean, I can't wait for the NFL season. Thank you guys for watching this episode. Let us know down in the comment section what you thought about each team's off season. We'll see you next time.